Bird by Bird. Some Instructions on Writing and Life. By Anne Lamott, author of Traveling Mercies. Character. Knowledge of your characters also emerges the way a Polaroid develops. It takes time for you to know them. One image that helps me begin to know the people in my fiction is something a friend once told me. She said that every single one of us at birth is given an emotional acre, all our own. You get one. Your awful Uncle Phil gets one. I get one. Trisha Nixon gets one. Everyone gets one. And as long as you don't hurt anyone, you really get to do with your acre as you please. You can plant fruit trees or flowers, or alphabetized rows of vegetables, or nothing at all. If you want your acre to look like a giant garage sale or an auto wrecking yard, that's what you get to do with it. There's a fence around your acre, though with a gate. And if people keep coming onto your land and sliming it or trying to get you to do what they think is right, you get to ask them to leave. And they have to go, because this is your acre. By the same token, each of your characters has an emotional acre that they tend, or don't tend, in certain specific ways. One of the things you want to discover as you start out is what each person's acre looks like. What is the person growing, and what sort of shape is the land in? This knowledge may not show up per se in what you write, but the point is that you need to find out as much as possible about the interior life of the people you are working with. Now, you also want to ask yourself how they stand, what they carry in their pockets or purses, what happens in their faces and to their posture when they are thinking, or bored, or afraid. Whom would they have voted for last time? Why should we care about them anyway? What would be the first thing they stopped doing if they found out they had 6 months to live? Would they start smoking again? Would they keep flossing? You are going to love some of your characters because they are you, or some facet of you. And you are going to hate some of your characters for the same reason. But no matter what, you are probably going to have to let bad things happen to some of the characters you love, or you won't have much of a story. Bad things happen to good characters because our actions have consequences, and we do not all behave perfectly all the time. As soon as you start protecting your characters from the ramifications of their less than lofty behavior, your story will start to feel flat and pointless, just like in real life. Get to know your characters as well as you can. Let there be something at stake. And then, let the chips fall where they may.
Hello class, welcome to writing 201. Are you ready, mi amor?
That was fun, but seriously, welcome to the second level of this writing class. In today's class, we will focus on emotional acreage. If the excerpt from Bird by Anne Lamott was a bit muddled or just confusing for you, let me give you a different perspective here. Emotional acreage is essentially the background information that you as the author use to have a deeper connection and far greater knowledge of your characters, whereas your reader only has the gist of who the character is, unless you're a writer like Stephen King here, writing frickin' 1,100 page books, minimum 600 to 700, I think is what he averages on. You'll have a different connection, and that's why emotional acreage is so important to understand and master, because without a profound connection and well-rounded understanding of your characters, they will seem vague, to the reader, because even though their connection to the character is different than you because you're the one who created that character, they can only get as much as you put in. Meaning, if you don't take the time to do that emotional acreage, they will only get a certain percentage of who that character is. So understanding not just their history as a person, but their way of behaving, and where that behavior comes from. Does it stem from some kind of family trauma, or a loss, or maybe they had terrible romantic relationships or something? There's a lot involved here. So as long as you understand that your character is a human being, and you ask all these questions in terms of the complication of being a human being, then you'll have an easier time of coming up with emotional acreage. So there is no better way for me to really show you what emotional acreage than an example or two, which is what I'm doing today. So to start off, we'll be looking at the first book of series of unfortunate events, The Bad Beginning. And I won't really be following it word by word. I'll be doing snippets here and there. So I'm going to focus on the three characters. Okay? Starting with Violet. So on page 2, we're going to start there. Violet Baudelaire, the eldest, liked to skip rocks. Like most 14-year-olds, she was right-handed, so the rocks skipped farther across the murky water when Violet used her right hand than when she used her left. As she skipped rocks, she was looking out at the horizon and thinking about an invention she wanted to build. Anyone who knew Violet well could tell she was thinking hard, because her long hair was tied up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. Violet had a real knack for inventing and building strange devices, so her brain was often filled with images of pulleys, levers, and gears, and she never wanted to be distracted by something as trivial as her hair. This morning, she was thinking about how to construct a device that could retrieve a rock after you have skipped it into the ocean. So I'll pause there for a second. So right there, even though it's kind of just trivial information about this character, we still have a sense now about who this character is. So we now know that she has a very creative mindset, very mechanical and thoughtful, and hands-on. And also, she has her own habits that allow her to think a certain way. So we know not just her way of thinking, but her way of utilizing her own behaviors to show to the audience who she is as a person, her specific, behaviors and even emotions throughout the book. But right here is just about who she is as a person. So let's move on to Klaus Baudelaire. The middle child and the only boy liked to examine creatures in tide pools. Klaus was a little older than 12 and wore glasses, which made him look intelligent. He was intelligent. The Baudelaire parents had an enormous library in their mansion, a room filled with thousands of books on nearly every subject. Being only 12, Klaus of course had not read all of the books in the Baudelaire library, but he had read a great many of them and had retained a lot of the information from his readings. He knew how to tell an alligator from a crocodile. He knew who killed Julius Caesar. And he knew much about the tiny, slimy animals found at Briny Beach, which he was examining now. So, same thing. We have an image of his intellect and his more book smarts, and his overall persona, in which the glasses is just this little detail
that you can differentiate him from his sister, and being more methodical and theoretical than her. That's how we now know that with this writer's way of showcasing his emotional acreage for these characters, that we can depict each character from the other, because we know that they're not this mishmash of the same person. They all have individual details. Lastly, Sunny Baudelaire. Sunny Baudelaire, the youngest, liked to bite things. She was an infant, and very small for her age, scarcely larger than a boot. What she lacked in size, however, she made up for with the size and sharpness of her 4 teeth. Sunny was at an age where one mostly speaks in a series of unintelligible shrieks, except when she used a few actual words in her vocabulary, like bottle, mommy, and bite. Most people had trouble understanding what it was that Sunny was saying. For instance, this morning she was saying, "Gack!" over and over, which probably meant, "Look at that mysterious figure emerging from the fog." So, because she's an infant, the details here is really, it's not that it is vague, it's just so you understand that, like I said about the difference between certain characters, is that we know that this character will have less of a character growth than the other two because of the age and limitations as a baby. So that might not mean that she'll have as great of depth as the other characters because they're older, but she will have personality, and she does have distinct features. So like the 4 sharp teeth, her mannerisms and way of speaking. Like everyone knows what a baby is, but the fact that the writer took the time to actually show the specifics of an infant's behavior gives this character color. Okay? So, I hope that example helps you. But here, a little shorter as of an example, but still valuable. So for It by Stephen King, we're looking at the first page here. The boy in the yellow slicker was George Denbrough. He was 6. His brother William, known to most of the kids at Derry Elementary School, and even to the teachers who would never have used the nickname to his face, as Stuttering Bill, was at home hacking out the last of a nasty case of influenza. And that autumn of 1957, 8 months before the real horrors began, and 28 years before the final showdown, Stuttering Bill was 10 years old. So you see, even within just that little paragraph on the first page, we already have this relationship building between not just the characters and the author, but the reader as well. Because we know that this kid who was out playing in the rain with the boat that his older brother made, we understand that there is these little distinctions. So the older brother has a stutter, but he loves his brother very much. That's why he took the time to make this little paper boat and make it, as well as he could, so that his little brother can enjoy and have time that is well spent outside in the rain and still enjoy himself. Where the older brother, is just miserable and sick in bed, but he loves his brother very much. So with that emotional acreage, where we can already see that what is not on paper but is very clear, is that the author understands these characters very well. He understands the relationship that these characters have to each other and to themselves. So we can see that maybe Bill with his stutter has trouble at school in terms of making friends, and maybe he's being bullied all the time, or he gets into fights and whatever. All that kind of stuff that we wouldn't see if the writer didn't take the time to develop these details. So to end this class, I would like you to do an exercise that I wrote ahead of time. So it's in 4 steps. You will take a person, any name you want, and start asking these questions. So to start, we have a 6-year-old girl. Now, it doesn't have to be a young character. If you want the character to be middle-aged, 20s, late 60s, whatever, it's your choice, but keep it simple and just create that meat that you put on the bones. So, Jane, a thoughtful 6-year-old who loved to color outside of the lines in coloring books. So, right there we have the gender, the age, and one of her little hobbies. She might only be 6 years old, but it's still a detail. It's still something that you can work off of. So the questions that I asked myself when I wrote this is, how old is she and what does she like to do? Okay? Second step is working off of that. So, is it simple? Is it a kid's story? Is there just no questions? It's just some fun little book? Or maybe it's written for adults. You can start with a young character in a dark novel, just like Stephen King did in It. The kids are very young, but it's a very dark novel. It's not meant for kids. So how can you do that with a young character? Well, you start asking about the environment. Okay? So let's say she has a harsh environment. So I wrote a little paragraph here based off of that image in my head. Sometimes it's hard to do because of all the loud stomping and furniture being moved from the upstairs neighbors. She swore the floors of the apartment were as thin as the walls when her parents yell. So, how does that connect to step 1? Well, I was asking myself, why does she do this? Is this just something she does for fun? Or is she trying to distract herself from something darker? Like, what if her parents are neglectful or they're just real alcoholics or noisy? What kind of environment is she in? What is her purpose for distracting herself? Is it to keep herself from falling apart because she doesn't have any kind of real guidance? And it could be the opposite. You could have details of her life where she's being smothered by her parents, very sheltered and restricted from creative freedom. And maybe that's why she draws all the time and colors all the time. Now that's step 2. Let's say that that's a situation where it's a very hectic environment. You would ask for coping mechanisms when she's afraid. Maybe she puts on headphones and listens to pop music loudly, or plugs her ears and plays with dolls. It's up to you. And then last step 4, secondary characters that guide her in life act as stronger influence. So that means you ask yourself, who else is in this character's life that has made her the way she is now? Or how can they help her change? How can they help her get out of this tough situation? Maybe find different ways that she can cope. Or just have a better life. So, up to you. I hope you found this informational and entertaining. And as always, happy reading and see you later!